Hi everyone, good afternoon, and again, good morning if you're in Pacific time. So, hi Michelle, hi Laura, Stephanie. Great seeing all of you here, and I'll go ahead and start the presentation. I'm not sure if someone is supposed to moderate the session. I know there's another presentation right after me, which Jim is actually conducting, Jim Sutterman, and so I'll just give it a minute before I start because I don't want to keep everyone waiting, just to be respectful to everyone's time. So if you're here on time, I'll just go ahead and start, unless there's a moderator. In that case, just stop me and go ahead.
You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the topic of my presentation today, it's privacy-aware intelligent conversational systems. And I'm Dr. Shovik Ghosh. I'm an assistant professor at the School of Information, San Jose State University. I also go by Vic, and I'm the program coordinator for our undergraduate program in information science and data analytics as well. So before I go into today's presentation, I just want to make sure, yes, it's recording. And again, this Library 2.0 event is being San Jose State University School of Information is one of the founding partners. So now, before I begin with the privacy aspects of it, and I'm sure this is at this point, most of us are aware of what a conversational system is, but then there are a lot of definitions of such systems going around. And so I would like to kind of fix the definition first before I go into the privacy aspects of it. So conversational search, and again, when we talk about conversational search, we talk about an interactive communication. It's not a one-way communication, which we are more used to when we use the existing intelligent personal assistants like Siri, Cortana, Alexa. For us, it's mostly a one-way communication. We ask them to do a task, it gives us the answer, or maybe plays some music, turns off the light. For my system, it also gives me security alerts. I have integrated it with the smart home system, but that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a mixed initiative, which involves both the user and the system. So the user can talk and the system responds, and the system can also take initiative and talk informally or formally, however it is, but the knowledge is exchanged and it follows the theories and the norms of human-human conversation. Now, ideally, the searcher, for a search system, the searcher should explain his information problem to the system in natural language. Which means that we are not using any query keywords, but we are talking as if we would do to another human being. It's highly contextual, and it mimics the conversation between a human information seeker and a provider. For example, we are all here. It could be a library patron conversation, right? And this interaction, it's not limited, and it should not be limited. It should go over multiple turns, which would enable the system to build the necessary context, and it cannot build the context in one turn. It builds it up slowly, both short-term and long-term context. And the system should resolve ambiguities through clarifications, and then it should retrieve documents or information that are most suited to the needs of the user, exactly how a librarian would do. And a conversation system, currently, they are mostly goal-oriented, but it need not be as such. And just to think of the domain as a whole, it's a very interdisciplinary domain and involves concepts from computer science, information retrieval, cognitive science, linguistics, and so on. Now, if you think of the use cases, they are extremely useful while multitasking, when we are driving, cooking, where we need both the hands-free and eyes-free operation. It's also useful for visually impaired people or people with limited literacy skills. And the conversation, it could be in the form of text, as we see in chatbots. It could be in the form of audio, as in intelligent personal assistants, and it could also be embodied, where the agent may have a face or a persona and may even be implemented in augmented reality or virtual reality. Now, let's look at the popularity of such systems to see if it even warrants a research on their privacy aspects. So as of now, we have, as of 2021, we have 1.8 billion users of speech interfaces. And 1 in 4 people, they use conversational user interface. And this is following a research which was way back in 2016. And even then, 1 out of 4 people were using CUIs or conversational user interfaces. Now, this also brings in some challenges. The growing popularity makes us look into the certain limitations of such systems. One of them is the user mistrust. And as one user says, that it's constantly listening to private conversations. And most of us at some point in our interaction with the personal intelligent assistants, we have felt that way. We have felt Alexa is always listening. And anytime I tell anyone that I work with conversational agents, that they're like, do they listen to us all the time? And to be truthful, it does. It keeps listening for those keywords. So the communication port is always open. It's always trying to listen if you're trying to activate a conversational session using those keywords. And that's one major reason of user mistrust. And then there's complex legal texts, because current privacy regulations, they are often communicated in complex legal texts, and which is problematic, especially if you think we are interacting over speech interfaces. Because one, reading long texts, it violates the design principles, and it's not effective, it's not usable. And then again, when privacy information is presented in the form of text, users, they need to switch from talking to the speech interface, which is an audio, to looking up information on screen. And this is called modality switching. And users typically, they don't like it. You're on your phone, you're on your digital watch, which has very small displays. And you typically won't want to read any text in those kind of documents, unless you're sitting in front of a computer. Now, Schaub et al. In their 2015 paper, they suggest that we should integrate privacy notices into a system's design instead of just tackling legal text there. And current standard for presenting privacy information is in the form of legal notices on a GUI, which does not work well for conversation user interfaces because the display is very small. So now we need new solutions on how we can communicate privacy in a conversation. So it's important that we design privacy-aware systems, and it's both timely and important currently. Now, the term conversational privacy, it has been used in the past to refer to a person's ability to have conversations without being overheard and understood by people outside. And this is from Kuprit's 2003 paper. Now, if we look at current context of CUI, conversational user interfaces, this term needs to be reframed. One, it means that we can, without private information being disclosed to third parties without explicit user permission, and with conversational agents expressing privacy-related information in dialogue form. So not in the form of text, but in the form of dialogue, like we spoke about mixed initiatives. Agent says something, the user responds, agent clarifies. The conversational privacy has clear advantages to presenting users with long text form of legal notice, which is usually ignored by users. I know there are a few lawyers here, but I would probably scroll down and hit like accept. Now, companies can claim that they can conform with legal requirements by presenting privacy notices in standard long text form. However, this also makes these companies vulnerable to user mistrust. Conversational privacy, it is an elegant approach. It could be an elegant approach to building trust with the users by offering an accessible and easy to understand way of staying informed and in control of one's personal data. So there's initiatives, there's some advantages for developers as well and companies. Now, users' perception and reactions to conversational privacy may be very much context dependent. A user who interacts with a banking system may be more privacy aware than a user who's just using the interface to play music. And that brings us to the concept of contextual integrity. Now, CI or contextual integrity, it means compatibility with presiding norms of information, appropriateness, and distribution. So it's a privacy construct, if we just want to use one phrase for it. It's a model of information privacy, and it ties adequate protection for privacy to norms of specific contexts, demanding that information gathering and dissemination to be appropriate to that context and also obey the governing norms of distribution within it. Now, what is norms of appropriateness? Say an agent is collecting private information, which is completely unrelated to the task. You want Alexa to play music, and on the other hand, it's trying to recognize what emotion you are displaying, or maybe what's your voice modality. Using that, it kind of figures out, are you upset, are you sad, and it shares that information with the third party who can gain advantage of that situation. Now that's not appropriate. Two, it's a norm of information flow. Now the agent again can share your private information with a third party without consent from you. One, collecting information that's not appropriate. Two, sharing it with someone who's not supposed to view that information. And again, the user should be in sole control of this information flow. Now, the model is intended to serve only as a justificatory framework and to prescribe specific restrictions on collection, use, and dissemination of information about people. So that's what CI is all about. Now, privacy of CUI, that's actually very complex, and it can be affected by and studied on at least 5 different levels. And this is not a formal structure, but we are constantly exploring what are these levels. One, there's technology. For an overview of privacy preserving technologies, we can look into different papers who deals with various aspects of technology. And again, we will look into them in more detail in the following slides. Then there's user interface design, users themselves, the service context, and the society. So first, let us look into technology. And one may ask how different privacy preserving technologies actually affect user perception and behavior. Now, answers to this question may help us prioritize the development of these technologies. So this will allow us to kind of rank those technology aspects which we need to deal with. And on level 2, we have the user interface design. And this is for designers. They may ask how to communicate privacy preserving technologies or information, both in an easy to understand and accurate manner. Conversational privacy suggests that we use dialogues to communicate information about privacy. However, we do not have a best practice on how to explain complex technological as well as legal information in dialogue form. Moreover, we also lack information on how conversational privacy affects users if users take the initiative and ask for privacy information themselves. For one, it can be initiated by the machine and also by the user. Then on level 3, we have the user. And researchers may investigate on how users can be motivated to inform themselves about their data and their rights. As informed users, and this may involve some form of education as well. And informed users are a prerequisite to informed consent. And currently, a lot of users, they do not inform themselves. So that's definitely an issue which we need to tackle. And again, I will go into HCI approaches on solving this issue. On level 4, we have service context, and companies may ask if their particular service benefits from conversational privacy, because different context and use scenarios, they need to be assessed. Conversational assistants are prevalent in several scenarios like customer service, shopping, healthcare, automotive, smart home control, and even government. So it makes sense to identify those contexts and see how the use cases, how the privacy communication can actually vary based on those contexts. And lastly, we have the level 5 or the society, where lawmakers, legal experts, as well as the public at large, they may ask if design principles that can render unwarranted trust in CUI should be regulated. For example, Ishen in their 2019 paper demonstrated that human likeness of CUI can prompt users to disclose more information about themselves. Thus, designing CUI to seem more human-like may prompt users to act more carelessly with their data. Society will also have to decide which privacy-preserving technologies and designs or they're required for funding. And making these decisions, society and decision makers, they also need to be informed about the various capabilities and limitations of technologies and designs, because sometimes I interact with people who do not come from tech background, and there's a lack of education about what we can achieve with the current state of the art. So I think that's definitely something which lawmakers, which decision makers, they need to understand as well. And conversational privacy also requires such communication, and it may help both individual user, society, and lawmakers to make those informed decisions. Now, this is the solution to what the challenge which we have at hand. Now, to solve the issue of conversational privacy, it is not sufficient to look at the user side alone or the system side alone. We need to look at both of them. Now, once we look at the HCI aspects, we see that there's the users and the system, and they are interacting over some kind of communication channel. So looking at the HCI, this would be levels 2 and 3 of our conversational privacy structure. And we have to think about 3 questions mainly. One, does informing users about conversational privacy, does it affect users' perceptions? Does conversational privacy affect users' choices? And how these perceptions and choices, they vary across different usage scenarios. During an information seeking session, the user and the agent are engaged in a dialogue and they're exchanging information. Now, at the end of the session, the agent can inform the user about their rights, for example, according to GDPR. And the agent can also offer the user the opportunity to learn more about how their data are processed and information about the location of the servers where their data are actually saved on. As researchers, we can evaluate the effect of system prompts on user perception, user choices, and again, those scenarios, user scenarios on user perception and privacy. And we can quantify the similarities and differences across scenarios and establish a categorization framework. The users could be interviewed on what criteria are relevant for them. And one such criteria could be data sensitivity. Others could be frequency of use, perceived risk, and so on. Now, we could, again, rank these scenarios and create different clusters because, say, high data sensitivity and high frequency of use cluster, which could contain banking, and high data sensitivity and low frequency could contain music interaction. Next, we could investigate the privacy scenarios from same clusters as well as different clusters and kind of validate the usefulness of this kind of cluster or class categorization. And this would also allow to identify new use case scenarios and which cluster they actually belong to. And now user choices, like I said, like the conversational privacy, it could affect users' perception and choices across different use case scenarios. And we are looking at different privacy nudges from the system. The system lets the user know that they have the choice to delete entire interaction history with the agent. They could delete only the sensitive information. They could also choose to opt out of any kind of human processing. But it need not be system initiative at all times. The user can also ask the system about their rights, data processing details, and the choices available. But again, this will need some user education, and we have to make them aware of the privacy threats and options available. Now, user-initiated privacy control is not very common today, and that's why we need to take more aggressive steps in this direction. And finally, the algorithmic approach. And I know I am approaching towards the end of my presentation, so I try to keep it short, but you could ask me questions and again, email me later if there's some doubts or if you have questions on this, because this is a bit complicated. And this again is the level 1 of the 5 levels which I presented before. And it deals with the large language models, which we typically use to generate natural language. And these LLMs, they have a tendency to memorize vast amounts of knowledge and also includes information that violates privacy of individuals. Now, practitioners, they're required to delete PI from the LLMs once an individual requests it. And each individual has a right to be forgotten if we go by GDPR. And that can limit the direct and indirect commercial use of their personal information. Now, previous methods of addressing such privacy risks attempts to remove all private information from the training data itself, which is data pre-processing, or using differential privacy measures, which would remove the data at the time of training. And this requires retraining the whole large language model. And such methods could be very costly and very time consuming. Now, both approaches, they require retraining the underlying language model every time the individual wants to practice their right to be forgotten. And that makes them inadequate for large language models because they are extremely costly to retrain. And they assume that private information can be easily identified, specified, and removed. And they can guarantee that information has clear privacy protection borders. Now, this is not how it happens in real world scenarios. And that's why privacy threats, they also need to be addressed post hoc training. Now, this is a brief slide about large language models. You could see the number of parameters, and this is is by Meta, and it contains 175 billion parameters. Bloom is by Big Science, 176 billion parameters. There's Megatron Turing NLG model, which has 105-layer transformer model. And all this training requires distributed hardware and thousands of parallelly run GPUs, which makes the process increasingly difficult. Now, I just wanted to show how privacy information can actually propagate through such a network. And here you can see that this is a collection of millions of documents which exist on the web, and it may contain sensitive information about people. And once we are training these large language models and we generate this trained large language model, and this trained model is nothing but a collection of word vectors. Now, these sensitive information, they actually propagate through the model because, like I said, it memorizes and be present in this word vectors as well. So the language is propagated through this word vector. And now we have our task-specific documents. So for example, say I'm trying to figure out how my system should respond to user queries. And what they will do is they will fine-tune this trained model based on my documents to generate the language or the system response. Now, as you could imagine, this private information, they will actually propagate through the whole system and the new algorithm, and again come out in the system response. So you can ask a conversational agent about what Elon Musk's address is. Does he have kids? Which school they actually go to? And your model may be able to answer all these questions, and thereby violating all the privacy rights and laws which are in place. And recently, a firm was fined millions of dollars for exactly such occurrence. Now, knowledge unlearning, when we are looking at pre-processing, again, we are dealing with these documents which are on the web. We will find and remove all private information. There's differential privacy, which again will deal with the algorithm aspect. So if you're looking at this neural net here, we will be dealing with this algorithm. And there's a new method, which is knowledge unlearning, where we will work with this smaller model here instead of dealing with the larger model and try to remove privacy aspects, try to make the machine or the system forget those private information. And if you think of a system where this takes 900 GPU days, GPU is a graphic processor unit, and if remove pre-processing step could take 900 GPU days for a similar machine and data, differential privacy will take 1800 GPU days, whereas unlearning will typically take 0.001 GPU days. So you could see that there's definitely some advantages. But again, this is a post hoc operation. We have no need to retrain the model. We can actually reverse the training objective. So instead of using log likelihood, we will use log unlikelihood. And we will also target sequential token sequences. And this leads to a stronger privacy guarantee if vulnerable data is known in advance. And this is just like the equation which we use now. Instead of using just the privacy, we are using 1 minus the probability of it. So if you're interested in learning more about it, please let me know and I can share more material with you. Now, to conclude, the popularity, it calls for exploration of conversational privacy. And we should be aware that conversational privacy is or could be violated when we are using intelligent conversational agents. The solution requires both human and algorithmic sides. Users, they need to understand privacy norms, and system should be able to proactively mitigate those privacy breaches. Knowledge unlearning can help protecting private information when we are using large language models, but it's extremely complex and requires more effort on our side. And again, lastly, we also need more research to test these theories empirically. So thank you. And again, that's all from me. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. You could also find me. This is my email address, and you could find me on Twitter if you want, if you have more questions. So at this point, I'll stop sharing the screen so I can see the faces, and I'll look into the chat messages as well. Thank you for attending. Okay, there's a question. Can a person teach a personal assistant to forget a private conversation when asked by the user? It's actually not about, this would be a simpler case. So if you have a private conversation and you ask the agent to forget the whole conversation, like I said, you could ask it, can you forget the entire conversation? And again, you could ask, can you actually just redact the sensitive information? So both the cases are possible. And I'm working with Inter-Paris project where we are actually trying to identify private information, the PIs in the text. So a system like that could also be used on for conversational agents, where the agent will recognize those private or personal information and just remove them from the transcripts or any form how it's saved in its database. Environmental components. So one, I think if a large language model is already trained and we do not require retraining, so like I said, the knowledge unlearning concept, that can save us typically hundreds of days of training. And which means that we are also being environment friendly, because training these models actually see more data than a human being sees in their lifetime. So you could throw the entire library at those large language models as long as they're digitized, and it could learn from the entire document. We humans do not possess the power to go through so many documents. Thank you. And again, there are newer models too, and it's not only related to or linked to conversational agents, but we also see there's a new model called Whisper, which has been trained on 864,000 hours of conversation, and which makes it 45% more audio, which the system has listened to, compared to a human who listens to audio data for 16 hours a day for, if we say average lifetime is 80 years for a human being. So 80 years multiplied by 365 days multiplied by 16 hours of daily listening, and the machine has still listened to 45% more data. So it has been doing splendidly on transcription services. Okay, any further questions? I do see I have 2 more minutes remaining. Yeah, Norm. So unlearning, it's basically what we are doing when we are fine-tuning the model in the later stages. And what we would typically do is we would adjust the loss function. So instead of the loss function trying to optimize, say, minimizing the loss for language model, we would also have a loss function where we typically, so let's say we say these are our PIIs, and we have like those phrases, sentences, words, and we also measure how much the system has actually forgotten. So the concept would be similar to what we would do for reducing overfitting, when we would just take random samples of text away from the model and try to make it relearn. But typically we are working with the loss function here instead. And the loss function is minus log of 1 minus the probability, and that probability is seeing that personal information. So we are making it forget instead of learning. So just the reverse of the learning. Yes, the number of languages in use, unfortunately, it's very much English centric right now. Whisper, like I said, Whisper is good with English, Spanish, a few other popular languages. It definitely, the performance starts deteriorating once you go away from English. So it's a very English specific models which we are dealing with currently. Thank you. And I'll stop recording now. I know there's another session which has already started with some of my partners in Interparis, Jim and his team. So I'll stop recording here. Okay, Stephen, you have a question. Do you have any advice? What could water down privacy for those who don't understand? I think this is actually, I'm more of a computer scientist, and I think watered down privacy would be if privacy experts, they kind of give us some feedback. Like I said, HCI perspective would be useful. We can throw some towards the user and assess how they're feeling about our approaches, right? We could tell them, hey, your privacy information may be violated here. Do you want us to remove this kind of information? So the system could be proactive. It could be like, you discussed your address, you discussed your phone number when you were talking to me. Do you want me to remove them? So I think those privacy nudges, or sometimes we have also seen that in privacy, people care more about their family, relatives, friends than themselves. So we could also make it say like, you discussed your son's school in this conversation, and you want us to remove it. So I think those privacy nudges could be useful from HCI perspective. Technology is not in use anywhere. This is still like a work in progress. So especially if I'm talking of knowledge and learning, that's actually not been implemented in any domain apart from the research which is ongoing right now. Thank you, everyone.